Welcome back, listeners. Gerry is back on the show today. We kind of just threw this podcast together, but I'm okay with that because I think what we're going to talk about is important. And it's very, sorry for the female, this is maybe a little bit more male centric, but I think that men in a way are sort of underserved nowadays. So we'll talk about sort of like a midlife crisis, manhood, what like our sexual schemas have changed since being a young man to a more mature man now. Let's start with the midlife crisis. Both of us are a men of certain age, and I know that I have personally seen the world a lot differently. And I don't mean because of maturity and more experiences. Obviously, that has something to do with it, but it's something about being, as they say, the middle of your life. So if I look at like a mountain, right? So the middle, if you're traveling up and over a mountain, the middle is that peak. You're at the top. And if we're looking at metaphor, so you're at the top of your game in a sense, right? When you're at the middle of your life. I'm not saying necessarily that's true, but if you just look at the symbolism and the metaphor of it, right? But there's a thing about being right there at that peak, which is you could see everything behind you, but you can also see everything ahead of you, which means the end of the journey, for me, I could see that, and that has really affected me and changed the way I view life. Any comments?
Well, I actually think that's a great analogy because, I mean, that's kind of the way I think part of what creates a crisis is that you're at the top of the mountain and you look around and you're thinking, is this it?
Right. Yeah.
So that's what I think for a lot of people, what a midlife crisis represents. It's like, it's not a bad thing. Like you get to the top and you think it's terrible. It's more of like you kept climbing, thinking it's going to be awesome when I get there. And then you finally get there and you're like, is this it? Is this all I worked for? And it's so it's a pretty appropriate analogy here. What does that mean for you?
Yeah. Well, I think about that, and I've heard that in other conversations, and people describe it in different ways. I think of David Foster Wallace, the famous author from the '90s, who wrote Infinite Jest, and he was a guy who had depression, had like this really interesting life and stuff like that, but he had struggled, a lot. He had tried to be a tennis player when he was young. That didn't work out. He went into writing, struggled with that for a while. And then everything he ever wanted came true. He had like the best-selling book, you know what I mean? Where all the critics, it was a popular success as far as financial, but like critically, like he got all the fame and accolades that any author, any person in a profession could ever want, right? And he just had that feeling of like, this is it. This is what I've been like struggling for. Is it, it's a strange thing in life. We have an idea of what we want, right? And then a lot of times I think when you get there, you go, well, this is not really what I wanted. So I guess what I'm saying is, how can we do better? How can we know that we're going to appreciate, if that's even possible, getting to the top of the mountain?
I don't think it is possible. I mean, I feel like the psychology answer to all of this is it's sort of rooted in what are called unrealistic expectations, where you're 18, you think, okay, I just need to get through 4 years of college and maybe a 2-year internship, and then I'll get my job, then I'll get money, then I'll get married and I'll have kids, and then I'll be happy, right? And that's the expectation.
Right. So you're waiting for happiness.
Yeah, you're waiting for a high level of happiness to finally pay off. And so what happens is when you get there, you don't get that high level of happiness. You're happy. The problem is not that you're not happy. The problem is that you're not as happy as you thought you were going to be. So what they'll do in these studies is they'll tell people something like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy do you think you'll be when you're 29, you've got your life settled, you got kids, you got a job, you're paying your mortgage? Oh, I think it'll be a 9 out of 10, right? But the reality is you're a 7 out of 10, which is not bad. That's great.
That's
But you're
great.
not a
Yeah.
9. But
Yeah.
you're not a 9, and that's what leads to the unmet expectation. You're like, this is it. And so a lot of these psychologists, what they'll say is, here's a solution. You shouldn't have that high expectation to begin with.
So set the
You should
bar
just
low.
not lower. Yes,
Lower.
set it lower. Don't assume that just because you've got a job and a family, you're going to be a 9 out of 10. You won't. You'll just be a 7.
Yeah.
And if you have that expectation when you get there and you're actually a 7, you're like, okay, yeah, I could be happier, but no, this is what I expected. And then you don't have that crisis.
Is that point of view the expectation of achieving a 9? Which, listen, I don't think it's unattainable. I think it doesn't have a strong level of permanence. Like, you could be a 9 or a 10 for a little bit, but it's a wave, right? You're gonna go from 1 to 10 to 9, and hopefully you end up with a medium happiness around a 7 or something like that. That'd be great. But I guess what I'm asking is, how much of that is very American, if you understand what I'm saying? Because if you go to other countries, people don't have that same sort of expectation. I think there's something very American about having that carrot in front of us. I think that's what the 9 is. You're at 7, but you see the 9 in front of you, and it just kind of keeps you going. And where Americans, our engines are always moving, always burning, and we never give them a break. We never cool off. Does it make any sense to you?
Yeah. You're asking if it's specifically American or maybe a Western
Right, yeah.
problem. I'm not sure if it is. I really don't know. I think if it is, though, it's probably more rooted in, I think Americans have a very strong narrative, like a hero narrative, that, we struggle, we pay our dues, and then it'll all pay off. That's a hero narrative, right?
Right.
That we'll become better and somehow we'll become a better version of ourselves when we're in our mid-30s or early 40s. These midlife crises tend to hit around that time. Right. And I think that narrative, embedded within that narrative, is the expectation. It's like, if I struggle for this much, it'll pay off in this grand way.
Yeah. Did you see Breaking Bad, or are you familiar with the show?
Yeah, I saw it.
I feel like, well, at least earlier on, at least the first season or two, that was sort of a major plot line or theme of the story, which was, here I am, I'm a guy who worked really hard. He achieved a very high level, if you know the backstory to the character. But then something happened. I think his girlfriend cheated on him with his best friend or something. They started this company together, and he reverted to a lesser life. What he thought was, I met this other woman. We had a child together. The child was handicapped. He works at this crappy high school.
Yeah.
The two people he worked with end up winning, like, I think, the Nobel Prize, like all this stuff. And then he gets cancer and he's dying and he's struggling. Yeah. He has to work a second job, like just the crappiest stuff for a guy who really worked hard all his life and just felt like, what the is going on?
Yeah.
With me. Like, if I've done X, Y, and Z, like if I put my head down and I've worked really hard and I've been a good guy, the expectation is that I should be at a better spot in my life. But yet there's no guarantee for that. And I think that was really driving the character or the show, saying that if you do all these things, it really doesn't mean anything. There's no guarantee to it.
There's no guarantee. There's always constant change, right? That was the theme. And yet the character wanted to reclaim that glory, right? Through his being like a drug kingpin. Like, that never left him, He only pretended that he was this humble man who simply wants to take care of his family, but behind a lot of that, there was like, I want to be the best.
After he achieved that level, and he I guess he beat cancer. I think you're right. I think you're 100% right, because he had the money, which was his first goal, right? Let me leave, because I'm dying. Let me leave them with a nest egg, and then he just kept on after. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. That's the problem with a lot of this, with chasing happiness, is sort of that it's just, you never know when it's enough, and if you have this high expectation, I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm just saying what these people would say. They would say that if you simply lower your expectation, you'll be content. And the reason why, I don't know, personally, I don't like that, because part of what makes me get out of bed is the promise of something better, you know?
Right. Right.
And then you're telling me, oh, don't aim for something way better. Just aim for something that's a little bit better. A part of me sort of doesn't feel as motivated for that.
I think it's something about the human psyche. I've talked about this a little bit on my podcast. I haven't really broke it down as much as I would like, but I'm a busy guy. But I think a part of it is, if you had everything, if your life was perfect, why get out of bed? You know what I'm saying? It's something about the human psyche where, it's basic. It's like, let's say, your stomach starts to grumble. That's an uncomfortable feeling because you're hungry, right? Mm-hmm. So you get up and go, oh, well, I got to go find food. Or you feel alone, so you go find intimacy. You know what I'm saying? You're mm-hmm. always getting this sort of sensory inputs that are sort of have a negative connotation to them, which drives you. Like, if you didn't have those things, you would, like I said, you just wouldn't move. Like, you need, for lack of a better word, conflict or something uncomfortable going on in you for human beings to just even move. Like, think of anyone who ever created anything or did anything. There's some sort of puzzle or challenge or something going on that they need to remedy in a way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think that's totally true. I mean, I just feel like people are driven to grow because they're kicked out of homeostasis, right? You're hungry, you want to find food, you haven't had sex in a while, you want to go find some sex, you want to be challenged. Yeah, I think that's the weird thing about people is we work so hard to get leisure so we don't have to get that. Yet that's where our deepest satisfaction comes from being this constant state of hunger, a little bit of satiation, then hunger again, right? But we just want to kill that urge because it's painful. Pain is another example of that. It makes us change our life sometimes,
Yeah. So if we look at the midlife crisis through that lens that you just kind of described, I think for me personally that uncomfortableness, I know for a fact I'm not as happy of a person now at I'm pushing 45 now that I was, let's say, at 25 or at 15. I don't laugh the same way. I don't just kind of feel the same way. I just have this drive of, I could see the end. Like I said, I could see the bottom of the mountain, and I'm still getting up every day. I still have these things that I want to do, but it's if I'm baking a cake, right? If what I'm doing is as a baker, I'm baking a cake, and sometimes people put something, a frosting or a glaze or something on it. That glaze or that frosting is, for me, there's an end to this. You know what I mean? And I could see it. And I'm not saying that that's the reason why I'm not as happy or whatever. I think it's that, how do I say it? It's like a maturity. You know what I mean? Like when a kid gets a prize and they're so happy because they won something, let's say like a contest that was random, that's a big thing for them because they don't have the experience. Where I say, listen, that could have happened. Anyone could have won that. That was random. It really wasn't attributed to anything that I did to win this contest and to feel this joy and this self-worth or esteem that I'm doing. I'm really into, because I guess I'm a little bit more pragmatic is what I'm saying about the whole journey of life. Yes, I could be really, really happy, but I really want to establish something and create something because the game is almost over. If I just had the laughs and the fun and all of that, to me, I think like that's great, but it's not enough in a way. I have to create something. I have to leave something behind because the game is almost over. A lot of people could say that, look, I just want to laugh the rest of the way, right? I can see the next train stop is the last train stop, and I just want to laugh. And I'm like a guy in the back of the train trying to build something real quick before the train stops and the time is up.
Sure. Yeah, I think, that's why a lot of men sort of they want to have kids, right? They want a biological legacy, or sometimes they want to write that great book or have that great podcast, right?
Right.
You want to leave something behind that will inspire other people. I've personally not had that. I'm one of the people who wants to laugh while they can. Not that I am laughing,
Right.
but I want to.
You want to experience some kind of joy, right?
Yeah, I want to enjoy the moment for what it is. You know, did you ever watch that show, The Office?
I know of it and I've seen some of it, but I'm not like a big fan.
Well, you don't have to know much about it, but basically there's this one character who he spends the entire show trying to impress people how he's gone to Cornell. You know, he keeps throwing name dropping and like, oh, I've been to Cornell. Aren't you impressed?
Yeah.
And you know, he's very cocky, but throughout his life he gets softened a little bit, and by the end, when he's leaving the company, he's really sad because he realizes this is where some of my greatest memories came from.
Right.
And he makes this statement that, it really sucks that you don't realize what you had until you've lost it. I wish there was a way that you could know that you're experiencing the greatest moments of your life while you're experiencing them, And that's what I'm trying to do. It's like to realize, like, okay, right now, as I'm watching my kids play in the pool, this may not seem like a big deal, but I'm going to remember this and I want to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I want to realize it, which is something I struggle with.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah, totally, man. That's funny that you bring that up because before my wife had to leave, we were talking. I don't know how I played football. Like, I played football my whole life, but just kind of like, with your friends on the street or whatever. And then for 1 year, I actually like joined a team, real like padded football and everything. We played together. It was sort of like my senior year of high school type of thing, playing football, something I always wanted to do. And I remember at the end or close to the end, one of our friends got like real sad. And he was talking about like, like, this is the end. Like, this is it, guys. Like, I don't know, like after the season, like we're probably not going to see each other after the next game or whatever. He just shocked me that he was at that age to be like 18 years old and to think that way and to feel that way. No one else thought about that, feel that way. But he had that presence of mind to be like, this is it. And I just thought, like, at this age, now looking back at it, like, he got it. Yeah. But was it worth it? Was his experience better than mine's because he went through it, because he knew the end was near? Or was mine's better because I lived in ignorance, and because I was in ignorance, I was in bliss. I was just having a good time. You know what I mean? Because I think people say live in the moment, but I don't understand 100% what that means, because I felt like I was in the moment. I was just experiencing joy because that's what was happening. Yet you can make the argument that he was in the moment more so than I, because he was aware, like I said, that analogy of the train stop. The train had just stopped and everyone needs to get off. That's it.
You should write like a book of analogies because you're pretty good at this. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. This analogy that you're talking about of a train stopping. I mean, that's the difference. What you're, I think, describing is the difference between happiness and meaning, Happiness is about being fully immersed in the joy of the moment. Meaning is usually more about linking the present, the past, and the future. So for him, he said, I love this present moment. I've loved our times in the past, but it's about to end.
Right.
And that gives people meaning because it gives them a perspective like, okay, this thing is special and it's going to come to an end and it's been meaningful, and that's it's choking me up,
Right.
Whereas people who are just in the present, they can't see that it's about to end, and they won't enjoy what they've had in the past until later on. And so, yeah, I think that's a distinction that I constantly battle with, right? And I think the midlife crisis for a lot of people is fundamentally about happiness. I was going to be this happy and I'm not. And it's less so about meaning. Meaning comes down the line. In fact, meaning is what sort of helps you to get over the midlife crisis, when you realize, like, well, I may not have been as happy as I wanted to be, but I'm thinking back on my life and I've had some good memories.
Yeah. So that brings up an interesting question. I think I understood from what you said what your belief is, which is being in the moment is actually just being present and having no sort of peripheral view of anything that's ahead of you or behind you, or what this means. But I think there's a lot of talk out there that being in the moment is actually the opposite, that my friend was actually in the moment because he knew what was coming ahead in a sense. Do you think that's so? Which one do you agree with more? Do you think I was in the moment because I basically I was just having fun and couldn't see what was coming? You know what I mean?
I think you were in the moment precisely because of that reason. Because when you're in the moment, you become fully saturated with the situation that's before you, you know? Whereas when you're experiencing anxiety, you're thinking about the future. When you're planning, you're thinking about the future. When you're nostalgia, you're thinking about the past.
Yeah.
You know, you're just taking the whole thing as a one collective whole. And I think, again, nothing wrong with that. That's just a different kind of thinking. You know, it's more of a purpose, meaningful based thinking. I think you are more on the moment in that example.
So I think for me, then I think I've matured because I think that looking at everything is more beneficial for me reaching my goals. Like I said, I'm the guy not just laughing and talking to my friends on the train. I'm the guy in the back of the train trying to put a puzzle together because I feel like if I don't complete the puzzle, I somehow failed.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel more present. I feel more present this way than before. I felt like I was a person probably much happier, but completely just unaware of my surroundings.
Sure.
And I feel like mindfulness with meditation had made me more aware of my surroundings.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think some people naturally can enjoy the moment for itself. And then I think some people, they need something beyond the present moment to remind them that you got to enjoy this, you know, because it's not going to last. And that's what I'm hearing you say, that, you know, knowing that death is on the horizon, it makes you say, okay, so what am I going to work on today so that when that happens, something will be left behind, you know? Yeah. Why is that important?
I don't know, man. If I'm a robot, it was part of my programming, just ingrained. Like from early on, I've just always wanted to do something, accomplish something. Is just in me. I'm not satisfied. Like even when you know how I knew someone had an addiction problem? I always grew up with people, you know, with drugs and alcohol or sex or violence, which is something I think people, it kind of came up in my show recently talking to someone, but people don't understand that if you didn't grow up in certain areas, you don't get that certain people are addicted to violence. That is an addiction. People are just always into fights or violent situations. And I felt like that is, but anyway, getting off the topic. Even when I, let's just say, went out, whatever, got drinking and stuff like that, there were people who would drink for drink's sake. They just wanted to feel the buzz. Where I was doing it to accomplish something. Like I say, that metaphor of the building something and making a puzzle. Where people would be, so we're both working on a puzzle, right? Here we go. Try another analogy. Two people working on a puzzle. I felt like the addict worked on the puzzle to earn a certain amount of alcohol and then stopped the puzzle, drank their alcohol, and enjoyed that buzz. Where I took alcohol the same as that person because I felt like it would make me work on the puzzle better.
It would make you work on the puzzle better. Say more about that.
To be more efficient about it. So, you know how people say you take substances and your creative part of your mind, you know, changes and you could do more things or whatever. It was never just for the sake of drinking or the buzz. Whatever I was doing was always to enhance, or I guess I never really took a break. Just, I mean, I did. Like I said, I was living in the moment, playing football and stuff like that. But even with the football, I felt like playing football, I learned more about football. I could teach football. I could be a coach. You know what I'm saying? There was always more to what I was doing. Even when I watch a movie or a show, I have to feel like it's not just for entertainment's sake. I'm sort of getting something, I'm learning something for it. Somehow it's going to make me better to achieve some sort of goal. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, it's a pattern that maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but as I understand it, it's a pattern that I think I see in a lot of men. I see it in myself. It's this improvement pattern, right? Like it's like you're has to accomplish something. Things have to be building towards something. I have to use this experience to enhance myself somehow. And I call it a male pattern because I think that women can sometimes be a little bit more comfortable with it's not benefiting me in any way. Right. I'm just in the moment.
Just enjoying it for enjoyment's sake, right?
Exactly. Like I'm just here with friends. Well, what good is this? Well, how is this helping you to build your resume or be a better person?
Right.
I'm just, you know? And I think men struggle with that. Obviously, men love that too. They like, spending time with your friends, of course. But it just seems like men are constantly trying to improve themselves. And I think first of all, that's great. And a lot of, hustle culture is about all that. And that's great, obviously, especially in contrast to not doing anything with your life. At the same time, I always sometimes worry that I feel like underlying some of that is a feeling like I'm not good enough. Like maybe not for you, but I can see a little bit for me. I subscribe to that because I felt like I am not good enough the way I am now. But if I become better enough, every experience I have, it somehow enhances me, then one day I'll be good enough. For whom, I don't know. I'll just be better. And better is better than who I am now. Because right now, I'm not good. I can't accept myself. And so I see that a lot of men, like they can't accept themselves. And so they're constantly trying to improve themselves, either their physical body, their mind, their vision. It's like, can't you just accept who you are right now? And sometimes people say, well, no, I got awesome. Well, you can do both,
Right. Yeah.
It's not
duality or more. Yeah. I think life is very complex, man. I have a lot of emotions and thoughts about certain things that are polar opposites. And I feel like both of them are true. I think, something can be hot and cold at the same time. I think our existence is way more complicated than black and white or hot and cold.
Yeah, I mean, that's to me has been, I think, the number one insight in my life in the last year. I think some people call that like dialectics. Yeah, it's like and I apply that to happiness and meaning. Those two things tend to contrast each other. Do you want to be happy or pursue something meaningful? I'm like, why can't I have both?
I have both. I want it all. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe I don't know how to get it, but I can learn to be comfortable with that tension.
Yeah. So I do a lot of this on my my podcast, which is I bring up subjects. There's really no good answers to any of these subjects, but I want to create a discourse or debate about this. And I think we had a good one about midlife crisis. Let's transition into manhood. What is manhood for you?
I think a major part of it is, growth, as I've been saying. Again, I didn't say that was a bad thing. I just think sometimes we think growth and hence not self-acceptance. But for me, it's about self-acceptance and growth. And that growth can be, I think thought about in different ways. One way is to reject passivity, to not make excuses for who you are because that's just how you are, so I think part of my view of a man is that you have to be outside of yourself, see who you are, and try to be a better person so that you can better protect those you love,
Yeah.
So it's self-growth for the sake of your community, or which could be your family or just your wife, for instance.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does what you're saying relate to the big topic that I hear a lot? And I'm trying to get some feminists to come on here and talk to me, but it's hard, with toxic masculinity. Do you think there's any correlation between what you said and their views of toxic masculinity?
Well, I mean, I think we can all agree that there are certain types of expressions of manhood that I think are, probably not helpful. And so one of them being, someone who thinks that they have to put others down to make themselves look better. So I
I
think
hate
that's where it
that.
contrasts. Me and this guy, we both want to get better. The difference is he wants to get better by putting others down and making himself look better. You
Yeah.
know, whereas what I want to do is I want to look at myself and go, you know what? You can work on this. This is the problem. You still need to get better at this. So yeah, I think that's where toxic masculinity comes from. Is a lot of it is I too want to get better, but I do it by putting others down and denigrating them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I've looked at this not too deep, but what struck me the other day when I was thinking about it is that I haven't heard toxic, masculinity, but what about toxic femininity? Is there such a thing? I think if you're going to say there's something inherently toxic about being masculine, it would make sense that there are certain aspects of femininity that would probably be toxic too. All right. Or unless you're trying to put out there to the world that somehow men are bad and women are good because they don't have, women are, sugar and spice and everything nice. And men are just, you know what I mean? I don't know,
Oh yeah,
toothpicks and
I think
nails or
some people.
something.
Yeah, no, I think some people definitely believe that. What is toxic femininity? I think
No, I'm
it's
not really asking you that. What I'm saying, I mean, if you have an idea of what that is, sure, that'd be great because I haven't really come up with anything. But what I'm saying is, I think the issue is anyone who comes up with a theory,
Mhm.
because that's really what it is. This is an idea, it's a theory of toxic masculinity. I mean, you're in the academic world. I spent time in the academic world. How do you create an idea of toxic masculinity and not explore toxic femininity?
Oh,
It's like me looking
yeah, I see.
out at a big beautiful mural on a wall, but I'm only focusing on the left hand side or just focusing on the right hand side, and I'm skipping the whole rest of the picture.
Oh, sure, sure. Well, I mean, you have to justify why you're doing what you're doing, And so if you're a woman and you're very into women's issues, well, I have to justify that somehow by putting the things that tend to oppose that, at least the things that I think tend to oppose it. I have to justify that by saying you're keeping these women's issues from being promoted,
Mm,
right? And so
mm,
I think it's a lot of it's because it's you identify with your ego. And if in your ego is femininity and you're a woman, then you're like, oh, I gotta take everything down that might threaten that. And
mm.
one of the things that is masculinity, of course, it doesn't have
Right.
to be, but masculinity and femininity, they're supposed to complement each other. But I think sometimes masculinity can dominate the feminine, and the feminine thinks I'm not supposed to be dominated, and it pushes
Mm,
back. I
I see
want to
what
do
you're
the
saying.
dominating too. And that's
Yeah,
where,
yeah,
a lot of conflict happens.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying, man. And when you look at it, like that, uh, men have, yeah, I guess you could say have been sort of like the oppressor
Sure,
to
sure.
certain things of, I guess you could say, are associated with femininity or just women. I like to look at it as there's really no toxic masculinity or toxic femininity. I think there's just toxic people. You know
Mm-hmm,
what I mean? So we're getting confused. There's a lot of biases, is what I'm saying.
mm-hmm,
Because if you're looking at
sure.
the mural, like I give that analogy, and you're only seeing the left hand side of the mural, that's some sort of bias within you. And so anything that sort of pushes that narrative, you just latch onto, and you're not looking at the rest of it. And I think it's individualism. It's two men could have really the same views about what manhood is, what masculinity is, and one man you're going to describe as toxic, and the other guy you're not,
Mm-hmm,
and their views are actually 100% the same.
mm-hmm. I mean, I tend to think of people as pattern followers,
Mm-hmm.
I do think that these patterns exist out there of toxic masculinity. And these are basically, they're just out there. These are just patterns of men who've not really thought about it, who are just following it,
Mm-hmm.
who've noticed, hey, men like this get attention, so I'm going to superficially follow it. So, I
Mm.
mean, I tend to think of it less so as an individualist thing and more of there just exists these patterns of masculinity, and some people don't can't differentiate them very well,
Hmm.
like the bully versus the hero. These are
Yeah.
both patterns that look a lot alike on the
Right.
surface.
Right. Yeah.
They're fighting for different reasons. And I
Right.
think some people just think, oh, people want a fighter, so I'll become a fighter, and they don't differentiate. A good
Yeah.
book on that is called what's it called? Uh, King Warrior, Lover Magician. Have you ever read that?
No, no. I'm gonna look into it. Yeah.
Explore it.
It sounds good. But I'm dying to find some feminists and get them on here and be like, is there such a thing as toxic femininity? Maybe I'll Google it later. I mean, there has to be, man. How can you explore one gender that way and not look into the other gender? You know what I mean? Like there has to
Yeah,
be.
yeah. No.
Yeah.
People put their blinders on though.
Yeah.
They find a way. Trust me.
Yeah, man. So for real quick for me, manhood, I want to sort of think about that and explore it. I think the way I saw it traditionally for me was the man stands up sort of for like what's right and taking care of his family and stuff. It's sort of like, I don't want to say the martyr, but in a way you are, because I've heard this described on other podcasts. People were talking about manhood and stuff like that. When you guys are asleep at night, right? You're at home, you and your wife in the bedroom, and there's a bump at night. Somebody's breaking into your home or something like that. The man grabs a bat or something and goes downstairs and meets that challenge, where the woman stays home and takes care of the kid, which inevitably puts the man in more harm's way. If you were thinking about all equality, you would be like, hey, babe, last time I heard a noise downstairs, I went downstairs to check out what it is. Today is your turn. We're being fair. We're being equal. You know what I mean? But I don't think that's right. In my idea of manhood, we're sort of the martyr in a way, because we put ourselves in those predicaments willingly. For me, like, I want to do that. I want to be the guy who does that and not send my wife down there or my child. You know what I mean? Does that make any kind of sense to you?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think for a lot of men, it just, even if you're scared, it's just like,
Yeah.
that's my duty.
Yes. Yeah.
You just feel like you're obviously going to be stronger most 90% of the time than your spouse or your kids. So what kind of man are you if you're not willing to face the danger?
Yeah.
Yeah. For a lot of men, it's really about that. It's about protecting their loved ones,
Providing for them.
Yeah, and which is such a strange from an evolutionary point of view. It can be a bit hard to wrap your head around that. Like, wow, you're gonna sacrifice yourself for your progeny. I guess that makes sense, but I've always grappled with that.
Yeah.
How does that evolutionary sense that I'm going to lay down my life?
From an evolutionary perspective, I mean, it makes sense because survival of the species, right? Like, yeah, you sacrifice yourself, but your offspring moves on. And I think it makes us. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that I guess that promotes a more sociable mindset too, instead of being, just thinking about the self and preserving the self.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. But I mean, humans can, we can foresee our death, and somehow we manage to short circuit that and say, no, you have to go down there. That's what I can't. I have a lot of hard time wrapping my mind around that. How we ever got to that?
Yeah.
As men, at least.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I mean, if you think of like, tribes, men are the hunters. They go out there. They're just always in danger from the beginning. we fought the wars and we hunted the wildebeest. So I don't know, man.
Well, you said earlier that some people who are addicted to violence. Well, maybe
Part
in some
of it,
sense, like, this excites us, right? We're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go out there and do violence, and I finally got my chance. Even if we're scared, I think a part of us wants it.
Yeah, that adrenaline rush. I think that's part of it. The esteem, because people look at you like, oh, what a great guy. You take care of your family. You sacrifice yourself. For that. Yeah, all of that is part of it. Definitely. For manhood, man, I don't know. Anything else you want to talk about for manhood before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's I don't know. I feel like I didn't grow up with a I didn't grow up with a father. I don't know. My
Right.
dad died when I was a baby, and sometimes I wonder, was that better for that or worse? Because for most of my
Oh,
life, I thought I was worse because I thought I never had someone to teach me how to, change an
yeah.
alternator.
Uh,
I never had that, and someone could say, "We can look it up on YouTube for crying out loud. It's all there."
well,
But it's
nowadays,
not
not when you were growing up.
yeah, yeah, or it's just not the same. It's just sometimes you need someone to hold your hand, at least as a kid, and say, "Here's how you do it. Here's what it
Yeah.
means to take care of your family, to model it for you." It's not the same as reading in a book.
Yeah.
And so sometimes for a lot of my life, I think I felt a little bit resentful about that. I was like, man, it sucks. Everybody else had a dad except me, and everybody knew how to do this except me. But now I think about it, and I'm thinking, you know what? If I did have a dad, I would probably copy his example, whether it's
Hmm.
good or not. It's a
Right.
good chance that
Exactly.
either I would copy it or I would be in its shadow, and I'd
Yeah.
constantly be influenced by it. And so because I didn't have a dad, I was forced to actually ask these questions. And it forced me to intentionally think about, well, what does it mean to be a man?
Yeah.
And so a part of me is kind of like, well, I guess that's one good thing that came out of this.
That reminds me of something I used to say to, I won't give out names and stuff like that, but my parents weren't perfect, and most people's parents aren't perfect. And I remember someone I knew growing up that didn't have a father, same thing, right? And they would kind of say, "Oh, you're so lucky because you got a mom and a dad." I'd be like, "No, I'm not. I got two crazy people driving me nuts all the time. You got one. You're the lucky guy."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's the thing, though. Imperfect people create kids, and it's like I wish that there was a class like in high school or something like how to be a man,
Yeah,
like something where we could intentionally teach it. It's like we just pick up these patterns and we enact them in a very poor way. And I really wish that there was a place where we can teach boys
yeah,
how to be in an intentional way. And I think
yeah,
Boy Scouts for some people does that.
yeah. But even with that, I feel that what is a man? What is manhood? The individual has the option to define that for
Mm-hmm.
themselves. Yes, it's great
Mm-hmm.
to learn from other people and stuff like that. But at the bottom line is you can't, I don't think we could push ideas of manhood on people. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
inadvertently, it's going to happen, right? Because people form groups and there's patterns, like you said. But I can't tell someone that they're less of a man because they disagree with what I say or feel. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, what I'm envisioning here was like how like home ec,
Uh huh.
right? But for masculinity,
Yeah.
like here's what it means to be maybe. And hey, you want some girls to take the class? Go for it. I think women
Yeah.
should develop their masculine side,
Right.
but fundamentally, it's about teaching these patterns in an intentional kind of way. And if you come to realize that, you know what, this pattern isn't for me, great. It's just when I say pattern, I mean this is something that seems to have worked for a lot of different cultures,
Mm-hmm.
and so we're going to start with that and start from there. And maybe you'll reject all of it, but let me at least attempt to teach it to you
Expose you
intentionally.
to it. Right.
Yeah, no
Right.
different from me teaching about American history, right? Maybe
Right.
you will reject it and take a different view of America. That's fine. Let me
Yeah.
at least show it to you
Yeah.
in a very intentional kind of way.
It made me think of inoculation for some reason. I don't know why. Like you look at, I
Oh,
just expose you to this, and do with it what you will, but you have
yeah.
the knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, but now you know how to change an alternator. If you don't
Yeah.
want to change an alternator, that's cool. But you know how to now.
So my dad recently passed away, and he was in a very same situation as you, where his father died when he was like 1 year old. So
Okay.
when he raised me, he said like I had no idea what it was like to be a father. So when I became a father with Sebastian, I asked him like, what do I need to do? How do I, what's it like to be a dad? Because I thought he was a pretty good dad, not perfect, but pretty good dad. And he said, I don't know. I had no idea what I was doing. All I did was pay attention to you, talk to you and love you. And then I was listening to a podcast of WTF with Patrice O'Neill, which is a guy who grew up without a father. His father just left one day, right? And he was at the end of his life. He had like these health issues. He was about to die. He knew the end was near, and he had a breakdown one day. And he said, at this age, at middle age, like 45 years old, I just realized I grew up without a father. And the guy, interviewing him asked him, so like, what does that mean? What's going on? And he said, I don't know, but I realized that all that a father is a man in your life who loves you and is there for you. I mean, I'm simplifying it all up, but I think the simplification is more powerful. All you need was someone there, a male figure who was interested in your life and loved you. And having that is a very powerful thing. Like we talked about God and religion, and for me, I think the biggest benefit that I got from that, because I've seen my life turn around ever since I started to talk to God, that I think the main benefit of that is that I feel there's someone out there greater than me, because that's what a parent is to you when you're that small. There's this amazing creature, right? That cares about you and is interested in your life. And that has a powerful effect on your psyche and who you become as an adult.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the themes of that book that I told you about, the king, right? That's the king pattern, where a king, what he does is he defines the limits of the kingdom. He says, this is where you belong. Don't go over there into Shadowland, like in the Lion King, for instance. That's not
the
where you
Badlands.
go.
Yeah.
You gotta, stay within your boundaries. And then the other thing the king does, which I just thought this was fascinating, is he validates his subjects, So when his subjects do something good, he holds court for them, and he says, I'm going to knight you because of what you've done for our family, and that's kind of what a father, I think, does, is he validates his son, and he says, you're a good boy. In this way, you've made me proud. And I think a lot of kids, they're like a blank slate, in many ways. They need someone to say, you've done well here. Of course, you can say that to yourself, but you need a father to sort of say, like, this was good. You did good here, and I honor
and give you self-worth. Like, how could you feel loved? Like inherent love, like just a love that's just there because it's just there because of who you are. It's not something like that you earn. You become a famous athlete or an actor. You perform in a certain way, and people love you for that. I think just a love for love's sake, or just because who you are, is a big deal, where people who were born into this world and abandoned by their parents always struggle with that. Like, why wasn't I loved? Why didn't this person want me? In a way.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of adoptees are like that, right? They don't necessarily want their parents' love, but they want to know what was wrong with me. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times for parents, the best thing we can do is we can see our kids. So when our kid shoots a free throw, we say, I saw that. Or when they say, I'm scared, like, I see this. I see you're scared,
Validate what they're going through.
Exactly. Just see them. That's it. You don't have to make any accomplishments. You can just say, I see you. You're a real kid. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I wondered whether I was even real, Sometimes you need a parent to sort of anchor you.
I don't know if it's because of middle age or whatever, but I have a big issue with reality and what it is. And I really want to do like a long podcast, but I want you to be on there. I got a couple of other people, but getting it all together is hard, man, because I think the topic of reality and what it is, it's always been something that philosophers and intellectuals talk about. But in recent years, because of how fast things are changing. So what I guess the point that I'm trying to say before we move on is that our great grandfather and our great grandfather and our great grandfather and our grandfather, those three old men, didn't question what was real or what reality is, as much as me and my son and then his son are going to question, because their life didn't seem that different. You know what I mean? Because advances weren't that forthcoming. Things are changing so much faster nowadays that I think that's affecting. But anyway, all right, we'll go to another. The last topic, which was sexual schemas and our views and all that. for men or just for us, like individually, how has it changed throughout the years or whatever? For me, I think that in the beginning, if I first think about it, that desire was always kind of like there. And when then you become a teenager, the hormones, I think that it was something exactly. I'm just talking about for me, for anyone who wants to listen and chime in, that it sort of validated you in a way. Yes, you had a desire to do it, biologically, like, you felt those urges, but it was something else. Like the kids, the cool kids, the older kids, they were sneaking off and having sex and stuff. You knew it. And you knew your parents had sex at a certain age. By the time you're a teenager, that's how you came into the world, right? So it's something that everyone else is doing. It's sort of like how you said, where like I took this free throw. Hey, Dad, you saw me, you recognized me, so I'm real. It was sort of like that. It just reminded me about that. Like I wasn't a real man or a real boy like Pinocchio until I got a woman to have sex with me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So for you, sex was validating of your personhood or your masculinity?
Both, I feel.
Both?
Just everything. Like if you were a guy who couldn't get, like, you just struggled that much, you were just like this awkward kid. Like who are you? What do you mean you can't find a woman around here?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it's funny because I feel like a lot of men, even in this age, in high school, I feel like a lot of men have this schema that I'm supposed to sleep with, I don't know, 5 ± 2 women.
Right.
Like
There's sort of
we
like a
have
number
this,
of how many I should, but there's also a different
exactly.
number, which was how hot was that girl? Because if you slept with
Yeah,
10 women, but they were all number twos, people didn't give you that much credit for it. You know what I mean?
exactly. But we have this weird idea in our head that we should sleep with this many women,
Uh-huh.
and there should be some of them who are at least good looking. And
Right.
it's weird because I feel like a lot of men who I know who are in their late 30s and 40s, even today, because they never got that, they feel
Uh,
like I want to get mine.
Sort of a
Like they
regret.
can't let that go. It's like,
Mm.
yeah, it would have been nice, but hey, 2 is not bad. I never got my 5, and they have this urge, like to scratch that itch, and it's fascinating to see them. I have an aunt actually who does this. When she was when she was a Mexican, and when she was 16, she got pregnant and she got married, and so she never had her fun, and so now
Mm-hmm.
she's 55, 8 kids, and she's like, I'm gonna get mine, and it's
Yeah,
like
that happens.
that never leaves you.
Maybe. I mean, I think everyone is different. But I think the curiosity is always there. It's just, I guess, how strong it is for the individual. And then that goes to
Mhm.
like what we're saying, like ideas of what masculinity is. Well, what's life supposed to be? Life, I'm supposed to sleep with X amount of people. I didn't do
Sure.
that. Something is wrong now with
Yeah,
me. You know what I mean?
you're not a
So I guess I would ask that,
yeah.
where does that pressure come from? Why five? You know what I'm saying?
Wi-Fi. Yeah, I don't know where that number freaking comes from, but it's definitely obviously socially inspired. I mean, I think we see other people sleeping with women, and you're like, damn, when am I gonna do that? Like
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I had cousins sleeping with girls when they were like 11.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I felt so inadequate. I was like, what the hell is wrong with me?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of it comes from that. I mean, in college students, for instance, a lot of times college students drink a lot because they think that everybody else is drinking a lot and they want
Yeah.
to fit in, right? So you
Yeah.
ask the average college student, how many beers should you have a day? 2 to 3 beers a day.
Uh-huh.
Well, the reality is that most people are having 2 beers a week. But
Right.
because they think everybody else is having 2 to 3 beers a day, they're constantly trying to catch up. So there's this
Right.
false narrative. And I think the same thing is true. Maybe it's not, maybe it is true, but the point is you see this pattern and you want to be just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Because then you're a man. And then that's
Exactly.
manhood defined by how well you fit that puzzle piece. So the
Yeah.
puzzle is this, and if I fit it, boom, I'm a man. And so I use these external things to make me feel like, okay, I've reached the manhood plateau.
So I think there's a thing where, you know, part of it is like it validates you because you're Jerry, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, you kind of went away for a second. That if other people want you, especially females, then there's something special about you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If these women are willing to sleep, because we understood that it's not an easy thing. You have to accomplish. It is an accomplishment. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In a way, you did something, and this woman was like, "Oh, I'll give you this in return for your greatness." in a way, you know what I mean? That I felt that was a big thing, because I knew guys who weren't very attractive, weren't particularly smart, weren't particularly athletic, but they were good at women. And the way people looked at them because of that, it changes who that person is in a way, because there were guys who weren't attractive, who could not sleep with women, and guys who weren't attractive, but could. And the way you looked at the guy who could, it's like having a talent almost in a way. It's like being a good singer or an athlete. It seemed like that way. It gave you some sort of identity, but not just like you have an identity because the nerdy, ugly guy who can't get laid has an identity. It's a valued identity.
Mm-hmm.
One that you're okay assuming that identity because on the scale or whatever, the ladder, right, the totem pole, you may not be the alpha, the top thing, but you're up there. You're not at the bottom either because of that.
Like the dominance hierarchy. Yeah,
I guess so.
That's how a lot of times with relationships, that's what they do, right? They help us to understand who I am. Like the only way I know who I am is relative to what external things I've accumulated, right? And that can be really bad, right? You start to value fast cars because you think you're a better person. But I think more fundamentally, if you get a lot of women, you feel like, okay, I'm a person of value to the opposite sex,
But within your peer group too, the males too, the way they react to you.
Yeah, that's an important part, right? It's not enough that you just sleep with a woman. You have to, your friends have to know. Like that high five, it's very important. It seems like a pig-headed thing to do, but it's very important. It's like, yes, I feel like I'm a part of the group now,
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more of a man now.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that the immaturity of it? Like, what's the next phase for you after that? Like, or did you ever change from that? Because I felt like that's always kind of there. But now that let me just talk about me. Now that I'm married, obviously I'm not going around sleeping around. But so I guess what does it mean now? Like, what's our ideas of it now? Because we're not playing that game of it. Or maybe that's why a lot of men struggle because they can't let go of what it used to be. And I think that's a problem. Yeah, for sure.
I think so. Yeah, a lot of men are just like, I never got mine, so the 40s are the new teen years,
Yeah.
And go explore that. Yeah, but I think for men who are married, who want to stay married and committed, I don't know. I mean, I think for me, it's been about mastery, like mastering, becoming super good at what I do. So rather than sleeping with a lot of women, it's like, okay, how do I, for lack of a better word, how do you like mind fuck someone, not just physically, it's
right.
like I want to go.
Well, the mental part of it is probably, the physical part of it is probably the least important part of it. I think I've always thought that.
That's been my realization. Not that maybe the least important, but it's only a piece.
Right.
And I didn't realize that. Like before I thought like, oh, my job is to receive my pleasure and to give good pleasure. And that's it. But now it's like, wow, it's a game, this whole sex thing is a interesting game, and you have to figure out a way to constantly make it exciting, and that's work, but it's also kind of fun. It's fun to take the same old thing and figure out, okay, how do I make it more fun next time?
Remember Ricardo Montalban, the guy from Fantasy Island? Yeah. So he had a saying I heard on a talk show one day. I guess he was married to one woman for like a long time. And, he was kind of seen as like this debonair Spanish guy who must have had like all these women and stuff like that. And he said, it's easier. I don't know. I'm paraphrasing here. It's easier to either please / satisfy 50 women like
Yes.
individually, like one time, like for 50 nights, I'm going to sleep with 50 different women than to please one woman for 50 nights in a row.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That's so they know all your tricks. You're like, oh, you're gonna go for that whole ear biting thing. I've seen that many times before. Yeah.
Exactly. Man. All right, bro. Hey, let's end it there, man.
Okay.
Thank you,
Take
brother.
care.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.